Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. We are here today with a review of Fugitive. This is a Kickstarter game from last year from Fowler Games. Tim Fowler, self-published. I think this is probably potentially a quintessential game of cat and mouse for sure.
Yeah.
And it's very elegant and simply put together.
Yeah, it's a two-player deduction bluffing game in which one player takes on the role of a fugitive who's trying to get from one hideout to the next.
And escape eventually.
And the other player plays the marshal who's trying to figure out each of the different locations or hideouts that the player goes to.
Yeah, you're literally chasing the fugitive along his trail.
Mm-hmm. So, let's talk about the components real quick. The game comes with cards. The cards are numbered 0 through 42, and there's one of each type of card. These cards get shuffled together into 3 separate groups and are played on this board. These denote the different numbers that go into each of the different locations.
Right, you've got your 0 to 14, 15 to 28, 29 to 41, then 42 is one of the cards that starts with the fugitive.
And the reason why these are shuffled in these locations is because it gives players some information on which cards or which stacks that they draw from.
Right.
You also have some possible event cards. Now, these cards are completely optional. You can play them if you so wish to. You don't have to, but the standard way to play with them is to take 2 random events and to shuffle them into each of the 3 decks. So you have 6 events that will come into play. If they're ever drawn by one of the players, they enact the event, and then they draw an additional card to replace that card, and so forth. And they change the rules. There's cards that benefit the marshal, there's cards that benefit the fugitive, and there's cards that actually benefit whichever player draws the card. And there's actually variants in the game. You can play those event cards in a variety of different ways. But we're just going to talk about the main game here. So, here's how the game works. At the start of the game, the fugitive player, which I'll be playing, has 3 cards in their hand, and they start with the 0 hideout already revealed to the players. 4 cards I'll have, 1 through 3, plus the 42, which is the location I'm trying to get to. The fugitive will also draw some cards from each of these 3 stacks. They're going to draw 3 cards from the 0 through 14, 2 cards from the 15 through 28, and 0 cards from the last stack. That gives the player some variety and some maneuverability early in the game.
Right. Yeah, so the marshal doesn't start with any cards.
Yeah.
I'm playing the marshal, and I start with basically this little dry erase notepad, and it is numbered 1 through 42. I've got a dry erase marker so that I can sort of eliminate the information that I'm gathering, because throughout the game, we're both going to be drawing cards from these various stacks. Any card that the fugitive draws is a potential hideout, other things that he's going to be able to use to get away from me, the marshal. Any cards that I pull is simply information that I know is not going to be one of his hideouts because there's only one of each card.
Right. So here's how the turn works. The first turn of the game for each of the players is a little bit different than the normal turns throughout the game. The very first turn for the fugitive player, he has the option. He doesn't draw any cards to start off, but he has the option out of the cards that he has in his hand to play up to 2 hideouts. Here's how hideouts work. At the start of the game, you have the 0 location. Anytime you move from one location, being the location that's furthest been placed onto the board, some of them will be face up because those have been revealed to the marshal. Right. Most of them, however, will be face down. That's because the other player doesn't know where the fugitive is hiding. The card that he's allowed to play can be up to 3 numbers away, or 3 spots away, locations away from the number that he had previously gone to. In this case, it's the number 0. So I could play a 1, 2, or 3 card. Unless you sprint. Now, each of the cards in the game has sprint numbers in the upper right-hand corner. Some of them have 1 sprint, some of them have 2 sprints. You can extend the length of your movement by an additional 3 spots. So at any time in the game, you can typically move up to 6 spots between 0, passing and not doing anything, or up to 6 spots.
Right, and the really interesting thing about that is I don't know what cards he's used to sprint, so he might use 3 cards to suggest that he sprinted 3 extra spaces, but you don't need, as the fugitive, you don't have to use all of the sprint. Right. So Jeremy could go from a 0 to a 1 and put 2 cards underneath it, acting as though he sprinted. But I didn't, I think he's maybe at 3, maybe at 4 or 5, but he's actually still back at 1. So my whole goal here is to figure out each and every hideout along his path until I can actually find all of the hideouts and catch him.
Now, as I mentioned in the very first turn for the fugitive players, I'm allowed to play up to 2 different hideouts face down. Now, the rules behind the game is that you have to play them in sequential order. So this number has to be lower than this number and so forth.
Right.
Obviously, you want to place multiple ones at the beginning, because if at any time the marshal deduces all the hideout locations, he wins. So if I place one and he guesses that one, both of these locations are revealed and I would be caught.
Right.
So my turn is done. We go on to the marshal's first turn in the game.
Yeah, so in my first turn, I get to draw cards.
Yep.
Now, normally I would only get to draw one. In the first round, I draw two. You can draw from any of the stacks, and it really comes down to your strategy. You could draw from the later stacks to try to potentially set up more of a roadblock later in the game. Or if you really wanted to try to seize an opportunity quickly, you draw from the first stack, which is what I'll do here. So I've drawn the 9 and the 10. When I look at these, I can eliminate them from potential hideouts that I know that he will never be at. He'll never use these as sprint cards either, which is a little less informative, but still some information. Mm-hmm. So I'm then going to be looking at his cards here, and I get one guess. So right now I know from this card here, it's a 0. This has got to be a 1, 2, or a 3 because he didn't use any sprint cards. So I could guess one number, or my other option is to guess a sequence of numbers.
Any number.
Any number. So I would say 2. Mm-hmm. And then Jeremy would look at his cards to determine whether I got one or not. Did I?
You did not get one.
So if I don't get one, he doesn't reveal any information. Then it's his turn.
Yeah, that's the great thing about the marshal's abilities. He can guess a whole sequence of numbers, but if he misses just one of them, none of the cards flip up.
Right, yeah. When you guess a sequence, you don't get the luxury of guessing once and then seeing and then guessing more. You have to say, I'm going to guess a sequence. You guess all the numbers you want to, and then he gets to check and reveal. If I guessed 4 out of 5, Jeremy says, nope.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get any information. So you can push your luck and guess more. And later in the game, you'll start to realize that there's some hideouts that you've figured out, but you don't want to waste your turn guessing them because you just know what they are.
That's right.
But it really gets interesting because it ends up with a row of cards here that's at least, in the teens long.
So each turn after the very first turn, the fugitive player is allowed to draw one card from any 3 of the stacks. So when I draw a card, and then I decide how much I want to move. I would place that card and any additional movement underneath of that card, and I simply go like that. And we continue this round after round, placing cards, letting the marshal guess. Cool thing is, if I place cards underneath of these cards and he guesses the location that I went to, all the cards underneath of it get revealed too. So then he has even more information on which cards I'm not going to be at and which cards he doesn't have to guess.
Exactly. The thematic aspect of this game is fantastic because you really get that sense of following on the trail of the fugitive, picking up clues, because that's what you're literally doing. As you reveal more information, you're getting more and more more close or closer to his hideout and closer to his location. And sometimes you'll want to try to figure out, okay, I've got this information. Should I keep on his trail or should I go back here and figure out what these hideouts are? Yeah. And that all depends on what cards you're drawing from here. Because the more cards you leave in this first stack, the less information you have about these. And then ultimately, if I catch him by revealing everything, the game is over.
Yeah.
If he gets to the 42 card, he wins. Now, if he gets to the 42 card, I have one last chance, right?
It's called the manhunt.
The manhunt. At that point, and this is really cool, he reveals the 42 card. I have one last chance to do one full sequence.
But only if the number 29 or lower has been revealed.
Right, I can't be too close,
Yeah,
basically.
if he's revealed anything after the number 29, he can't initiate a manhunt for my character.
So then I have one chance, but this sequence doesn't have to be stated all at once.
Yeah.
I get to pick one number at a time, and as I do, if I'm right, I get a little bit more information. So you can slowly kind of follow that trail that he's left and potentially catch him, which in our first game I was actually able to do with quite a few cards. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
And then in our second game, Jeremy played the Marshal, and a very interesting strategy came to light, where he had taken so many cards from the final deck that he created the ultimate roadblock.
Yeah.
And I literally couldn't get to the number 42.
Endgame location. We'll talk about that portion. I really like deduction games. I mean, I love the Fury of Dracula's, the Letters from Whitechapel, but those are all really long games. I mean, they're 2-hour games that require several different people to thoroughly enjoy. I mean, you really need 5 players to get the most out of Fury, and you could probably play Letters with 2 players. However, this is 30 minutes to get through the game. It can be played multiple times with each of the players switching sides. There's a really cool sequence of the cards, too, if you notice, and you probably don't notice, but 0 through 42 tells a story on the cards, too. So if you laid all these cards out into a long row, you'd see each of these locations with the marshal trailing him.
It's like
the course
a no-text comic book, really.
Yeah, it is.
You could watch it from beginning to end. It starts with sort of him in the city and the marshal catching his trail. It goes all the way to trains and automobile chases and all sorts of things. It's a really cool flavor to the game.
I like that it's a short, truncated version of those deduction games. What I found a little bit odd was the experience that we had with me drawing so many cards out of this deck. We quickly found that if the player who's playing the marshal can roadblock them and get every card from 36 to 41, it completely prevents the fugitive player from escaping.
Right.
So then it comes down to a timing aspect, which is kind of a weird way to end the game. You have one player, being the fugitive, simply passing because he can't do anything. And then it's just the marshal deducing each of the locations that you go to. So one of the strategies I used was to draw from this deck exclusively for the entire game.
And I think it's a valid strategy. I can guarantee you I'll never let you do that again.
Yeah.
I actually love that thematically, even though it was kind of a unique and unexpected way for the game to end. I like that basically when you think of a fugitive on the run, I was focusing all my attention on the early chase and getting out there and getting away from you. You, as the marshal, had more of we're going to cast a wider net and catch him in the long run. And I wasn't prepared for that. You know, so late game, I got to the point where you had set up a situation where, like it would potentially happen in real life, the fugitive has nowhere to go, and you catch him, which I thought was really, really cool.
I don't think we've played it enough either to see if I like the aspect of the manhunt. The manhunt is cool. I like thematically how you have that one more chance to do something. I don't know if the number 29 mathematically is the right number that allows a player to check past, and I felt like it should have been lower, like 25, 24 in that range. Because all that progress and all that manipulation that the fugitive is able to do can be undone at the end of the game, just like that.
And that's true. And I played the prototype version of this a couple times last year too, and ran into a number of manhunts that didn't end up in success for the marshal for sure. Again, after you play this a few times, I think you start to learn, okay, if I'm going to get to the point where I lay the manhunt hound, I need to have protected some information for sure.
Yeah.
So that the marshal doesn't have the
That's a valid
information
point.
he needs.
I mean,
Because if you can just make sure that there's at least even one hideout that's pretty well protected information-wise, then you're in good shape. And that all comes down to how you use your numbers to sprint. You know, like, for instance, if you use a lot of numbers, say your hideout's 24, if you use a lot of numbers around 24 for the sprint to 24, that's going to help protect a bunch of information all in one clump, making it very... Then I'm just guessing 1 out of 4 or 5, cards, which is an interesting way to go. I really, like I said at the beginning of the review, I think this game could potentially become one of the best hidden movement, nice, concise experiences out there.
It's a beautiful little package for sure. The art style is great.
And we have to mention this. The box looks like a briefcase. It's got the magnetic flap. You open it up. It's a really well presented game. I also like you mentioned Fury of Dracula, Whitechapel. Those games not only are long, but usually when they're played, one person gets to experience being the fugitive, if you will. And in this one, it goes quick enough to where you could play 2 games right in a row, and everyone gets a chance, or both players anyway.
And the experience is really cool on both sides, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like in Whitechapel and Fury of Dracula, I love playing the antagonist. I like being Dracula and Jack the Ripper, because it seems to be the most enjoyable experience, at least for me. Maybe not so much in Whitechapel, because I like being the police inspectors as well. But in this game, it's fun on both sides. Yeah,
there's success that you can have on either side any turn. So there's not just one player sitting there grinning at you saying, I've got you outsmarted. Both players get to do that from time to time.
So, guys, that is Fugitive by Tim Fowers. I believe it can be ordered directly off of his website, which is timfowers.net. If you guys have any questions or comments, make sure you make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and everything else that we do here at Man vs. Meeple, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.